Let's start then. Episode 0, the ENT podcast. We are ENT. I'm Travis. This is Ethan, the Entertainment News Team podcast. Going to talk about different things in movies, sports, television, music, just general things that interest us and kind of see where our conversations take us. We'll start with just a little bit about us and why we think that our perspectives have a little bit of uniqueness and a little bit of weight, and hopefully are interesting for people to listen to. I have a background in architecture and film, studied both of them, and currently work in the film industry as an assistant art director, production designer. Love film, have seen a bunch of movies, and I've always been a huge sports fanatic. Never was quite the athlete that Ethan is, but it's always been something that's fascinated me. So those are definitely two of the things I watch, consume the most are sports and film and television. So I'm just excited to talk about them. What about you, Ethan?
Yeah, very nice. I'm Ethan Evans, and for some context, Travis is my cousin. So I like to think that we have a lot in common, especially when it comes to things that we like to talk about, debate, and yeah. I'm obviously still in college, a little bit younger than Travis. I'm going to Duke University currently, and I'm a junior who's also on the golf team. So that's kind of the track I'm on right now, hoping to play pro golf down the road. But definitely have a lot of other interests outside of golf. Huge sports fan. I like to play and watch sports as much as I can, and also love debating them with guys like Travis who know what they're talking about. And just a big fan of media in general. Love getting more into movies since I've known Travis. He's great for recommendations, but starting to form my own opinions on that, and always following the news and music, sports, whatever it might be. So yeah, just looking forward to having a platform to talk about all these things and share our opinions to any audience that might be interested.
Sweet. So we laid out just a couple of general topics today for our episode 0. Some pretty big ones that have kind of been taking the sports and entertainment world by storm. Our first 3 topics we're going to cover for this episode are going to be the huge trade that went down last night for Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis, a Super Bowl preview, and some talks about the Oscar nominees, some of the controversies that have been happening there, and then just a short segment at the end of some stuff that we've been watching, listening to, and that's kind of how we'll have this first episode go. So I think that Ethan and I have only texted about the Luka trade so far. So I guess I'm just curious. I'm still in shock. I was literally sitting down to watch a movie last night, saw the notification pop up, and I'm like, did a double take. I was like, there's no way that that's real. I'm like, Luka's one of the most untouchable assets in the NBA. So I'm curious what your thoughts were when you first saw the headline.
The news came in this morning, or at least for me this morning, and I think having followed the Lakers quite a bit this year, it was kind of nice to see them coming into form. Anthony Davis and LeBron haven't been the best duo as far as productivity. I mean, Anthony Davis has been injured a lot. LeBron's definitely getting towards the end of his career, but I liked what Reddick was doing in terms of bringing in a lot of shooters to surround those two guys. And I felt like if anything, if they wanted to if the GM wanted to make a trade or anything, it would probably be for another big man to supplement AD and have him be able to play outside a little bit, or bring another shooter in. And so someone like Luka, who pretty much plays the same position as LeBron, is something that I just never expected to see. But after talking with some friends about it, I'm understanding that it's definitely more of a long term thing. And someone like Luka is 25 years old, can definitely just step right in for LeBron if he ends up going to the Warriors or wants to go somewhere else to try to chase one more ring. And so, as a Lakers fan, overall, I'm a huge fan of it. And, I think it's an offer they couldn't turn down. From the Mavs point of view, I don't really know what they're doing. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, it's hard to imagine what they could have been thinking.
Yeah, so as a Clippers fan, I'm just excited that maybe this is gonna take some heat off that Paul George trade. Maybe that's no longer one of the worst trades in NBA history.
Yeah.
Because from a Mavs point of view, I don't get it. Like from a Lakers perspective, it's weird because in the short term, I don't think it makes them better. I don't think it elevates this Lakers team this year to be a championship contender because now there's like no defense. Like the Lakers defense is especially the interior, they have like really no solid big men on the roster, at least from my perspective. So it's definitely a future move, but it's maybe the greatest future move that any team has ever been able to pull off. I mean, Luka has been all NBA first team 5 years in a row. He's been a five-time All-Star. He led them to the NBA Finals. He has caused immense amounts of pain and frustration as a Clippers fan in the playoffs every time we played him because he's one of the five best players in the world. And Anthony Davis is no slouch, in my opinion. Like he's a stud. He's a fantastic, phenomenal player. It's just really confusing to me from a Mavericks point of view because you have a guy who is your franchise cornerstone, who's young, who you've begun to build this team around, and before you've even completed that process, you kind of blow it up. Like you've brought in Clay and Kyrie, and you have guys like Gafford and Derek Lively that really like are starting to supplement Luka. Like he has all these options for distribution, and to kind of ship him away for a deal that really doesn't feel that strong. Obviously, Anthony Davis, I think, helps the Mavericks defensively a ton. It gives AD like true centers to play with, which is something that he's been wanting at the Lakers that he hasn't had. But you think about like some of the recent insane trades that have happened in the NBA. Rudy Gobert for four first round picks, like the Paul George for like uh, just a ridiculous amount that I don't even like thinking about. Like and Shea and Mikal Bridges for five. And it's like I don't think you would trade Mikal Bridges and Rudy Gobert for Luka Doncic. I don't think you trade Mikal Bridges and Rudy Gobert and two first for Luka Doncic. And those players have been valued by the NBA at nine first round picks. So if you were saying that they wouldn't trade those two players plus two first round picks for Luka, and you're saying that Anthony Davis and one is equivalent, it's like I love Anthony Davis. I think he's a phenomenal player. I don't think he's worth 10 first round picks. And so that's just where it doesn't add up to me. Like, and they're saying stuff about strength and conditioning. I don't know. What do you think about that like side of things?
Yeah, I think the conditioning is the only aspect of things that not anyone has an understanding of yet. And
Yeah.
it could be worse than we think, but I think Stephen A put it pretty well. It could be a good wake up call for Luka Doncic if he's being valued that low by a
Yeah.
team who, thought he was going to be a franchise piece. He's averaged pretty much 30 and almost 10 assists his entire career. So, hands down a top five player in the NBA when he's healthy. And the fact that you're willing to give him up for, like you were saying, more than just one first round pick later on, and then Anthony Davis and Max Christie. So I mean, it's really hard to believe. I've heard rumors that Luka's put on a decent amount of weight, but I don't think it's anything that he's not going to be able to slim off by the time the playoffs come around. And when you look at the Lakers and the Mavericks, they're both in a position where they can make a playoff run this year. And so
Mhm.
when it comes time for the playoffs, you want to have guys that come up clutch in those moments, and Luka's proven that he can do that. So
Yeah.
alongside LeBron, who's also proven in the playoffs, as long as Luka's doing some stuff on the side to try to get healthy before then, I mean, it's going to be a pretty tough duo to stop.
Yeah. It does make me question. It's like obviously like there's all these reports that like AD didn't know about this, Luka didn't know about this, LeBron didn't know about this. Like clearly there's something going on with the Mavericks organization that they were like terrified by this strength and conditioning, this injury, which kind of makes you question. You're like, oh, like should the Pelicans be more worried about someone like Zion? Like why hasn't Zion, who's had very similar issues with injuries and strength and conditioning, not be traded? But then from a Lakers perspective, I have to think that it means that they're not done. That some other moves coming at the deadline, maybe that is moving LeBron. If LeBron, who's notoriously been involved in so many trades that his teams have been a part of, was left in the dark about this, does that mean that he's getting moved? Because it feels like if you're in a win now mode, which I think the Lakers want to be with LeBron, and I know LeBron wants to be, this is not a team that has the defense to win a championship, even though the offense is going to be ridiculous. I mean, Luca and LeBron together is going to be really crazy and will cause me so much pain as a Clippers fan.
Yeah. I think it's a great point you made about LeBron being in the dark and all this. I mean, it does seem like LeBron becomes the GM of every team he's on.
Hmm.
And, I know you mentioned in the past that he's always wanted to play with Luka on the same team. And so maybe the Rob Pelinka took that into consideration. But still, you would think that there'd be ongoing conversations if they were in talks about a trade or even acquiring anyone that might be a good addition for the playoffs. So that is a really good point. It would be interesting to see if they do deal LeBron. Would they go full rebuild or would they just go into win now mode with Luka Doncic? I mean, because I'm sure if you're trading LeBron, you could get a bunch of valuable assets that were not just good for the future, but might be good pieces to put around Luka this year. So
Yeah.
this brings a whole bunch of different scenarios into play, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, there's been rumors about the like LeBron to the Warriors, and it's like if you could bring in Kuminga and Wiggins to the Lakers right now, like I don't think that they're going to trade LeBron for 6 first-round picks, but I think you could get two probably solid starters, maybe a pick and a bench player, something around that caliber, like which is insane that a 40-year-old guy can be traded for that. That's just a testament to how great LeBron is. But you could really kind of jumpstart that process of that rebuild if they were to do that, I think. I mean, I don't think LeBron's trade value is ever going to go up. It might never go down until he retires, but I think that
You're right.
right now it's like if you're the Lakers, you love LeBron. LeBron brings so much to this organization, but you've seen kind of the process it's taken for the Mavericks that were trying to build around Luka. You've now kind of circumvented that system. And I saw a report that because of the tenure, like weird contract thing in the NBA, Luka's no longer eligible for a supermax extension. So it will save the Lakers $117 million compared to what the Mavericks would have had to pay him. And so you have $117 million to go out and kind of accelerate that rebuild if you do it now before he's eligible for that supermax in a couple years. So I don't know. It will be really interesting to see what other things move. It's like, if does this kind of reset the market again? Everyone's been talking about that after the Rudy Gobert trade kind of reset the market for that. Is this going to kind of change the NBA in terms of untouchables? Like, I don't think that the Oklahoma City Thunder would ever trade Shea, but I never thought that the Mavericks would ever trade Luka. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Definitely. I can't wait.
Yeah. I think before we move on, actually, let's just give our, like, what would you give the grade? Lakers, Mavericks for each side.
I don't want to be copycat of ESPN, but I would give the Mavericks an F on this one.
Hmm.
I just think it couldn't have gone any worse. I think the Lakers, I would give an A minus to the Lakers because I think it's definitely an offer that you can't decline.
Hmm.
But I also think it's never an offer that they would have gone out and requested. I
Yeah.
think that came from the Mavericks, and ultimately it's going to work out. It's going to be fine. But I just would love to see the long term goal from Rob Pelinka when he's making moves like this. Now that he has the new asset in Luka Doncic, like what is he trying to build this team around? So I can't give it more than an A minus, even though I'm very stoked about the news.
Hmm.
In terms of the Jazz, I think it's fine. I think it's a B. I'd have to read more into kind of what they were trying to do, but obviously they're a struggling team. They're kind of just trying to fuel that rebuild right now. And so I don't think they really lost this trade, but I think they were just kind of the piece that no one was really paying attention to.
Yeah. I would agree. Very similar for me. I think probably an A minus for the Lakers. The only reason it's not an A or an A plus is because I don't think it makes them better right away. But in terms of the future, A plus for sure. But just as of right now, like an A minus. And I'll go a D for the Mavericks only because I do think that potentially it sets them up for 2, maybe 3 years of really strong championship contention. And I don't think you can ever say you lost a trade if you win a championship. Now, I do think that maybe they were more likely to win a championship with Luka, but if AD is that piece. Now, if they don't win, I think it becomes an F, but I'm hesitant. It's just one of those trades. It's like he's such a good player. It's real close to an F though. Maybe a D minus.
I can see what you're
So,
saying. I mean, that trio of Clay, Kyrie, and Anthony Davis is pretty darn good. You could
mhm.
argue that it might be better than with Luka, just because Irving and Luka are going to be fighting over the ball. But now Irving can kind of step into that role that he knows how to play and be
Yeah.
that star point guard.
Yeah, so we'll have to see. I'm very excited to see how this turns out. And I think that speaking of things, I'm excited to see how they turn out. Let's transition into our kind of preview thoughts on the Super Bowl. I'm curious what your thoughts are, because obviously neither of our teams made the Super Bowl. But yeah, what are your kind of initial thoughts? Who do you think's going to win, and who'd be your projected Super Bowl MVP?
Yeah, I think initial thoughts, obviously, yeah, neither of our teams, me as a Seahawks fan, you as a Broncos fan, I think both of our seasons could be seen as successes in some way. The Broncos making the playoffs was definitely a plus.
Hmm.
Seahawks being above 500, considering all the stuff we went through, was not the worst. But ultimately, I do have a soft spot in my heart for the Chiefs for whatever reason. I can't quite get myself to hate them. I like Patrick Mahomes. I think he's brought so much to the game, and I wish there was more attention on just what he does on the football field. I wish people would acknowledge that it's very fun to watch, and all of the Travis Kelsey and his whole family, the issues they've had, and the Taylor Swift effect. I mean, all those things are kind of taking away from just the consistency of what he's produced on the field. And so I know there was a lot of people talking about things they'd rather do than watch a Chiefs Eagles Super Bowl, and none of those things were good. And that was pretty funny to see, and I understand it. I mean, it's seeing a rematch of two teams that have been consistently very good, potentially annoyingly good for a lot of fan bases. But I think we have the two best teams left standing, and the Chiefs are 1.5 point favorites. I think that's about right. I think I'd put them, 0.5 point favorites. I think there's such a small margin, but I think you can't put them as underdogs. They have that championship DNA. Jalen Hurts hasn't gotten it done yet. And so while I think the Eagles have a better roster, I think, I just think the Chiefs are going to find a way to pull it out. So I'm going with the Chiefs. Really close game again. I don't think Hurts is going to throw for over 400 yards like he did last time. I think it's going to be a more of a grind out affair. I think the Chiefs have a great defense that's going to prepare well for Saquon Barkley, and they're going to put the ball in Hurts' hands. I think he'll throw for 250, 300 plus, but not quite like he did last time. And I think the Chiefs are going to be too much. They're going to make the right plays at the right time. Maybe eventually their luck will run out, but until it does, it's just hard to pick against them. So I'm going with the Chiefs, and I think the Super Bowl MVP will be Patrick Mahomes. Very
That's
stock prediction, but I don't think anyone on defense can do something that's going to overshadow Mahomes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that those are all valid points. I will obviously not be rooting for the Chiefs as a Broncos fan. They have caused so much frustration, and the amount of times I hear about Patrick Mahomes on a regular basis from the media while I'm watching Bronco games, and it's frustrating. But even with my bias, I think that you'd have to have a strong amount of delusion to not think that Patrick Mahomes is one of, if not the most talented person to ever play the quarterback position. I don't think he's the GOAT. I don't think he's quite achieved enough there, but I do think it's possible that he's the most talented quarterback in the history of the National Football League, which hurts me to say. But he's one of those guys that you can never count out. They've won so many close games this year. It's unprecedented, literally. And I am trying to factor in my bias. I do think it's a really close game. I just think that so many of these teams that have these close games throughout this course of the season, they hit the playoffs. You think about like the Vikings or just other teams in recent years that have had 8+ games or something with one score wins. It eventually bites them in the playoffs. I think the Chiefs are good enough to not get blown out like the Commanders did. I do think it's a one score game, but I think this one finally doesn't go their way. I think the Eagles are going to be just a little bit too much. I think they've stepped up on defense. I think that Saquon is going to have a good game, but not a great game because I think they're going to contain him, but I think that's going to allow someone else on the Eagles offense to jump out. And my Super Bowl MVP prediction, I don't know, dark horse, I just feel like it's going to be like AJ Brown. That could that could be totally wrong. AJ Brown might end the game with one catch for 24 yards, in which case some of my friends that are Eagles fans are going to hate me. But I feel like it's going to be some player not named Saquon Barkley that's going to have a standout performance that's just going to tip the scales in their favor. And that guy's going to make a game-changing play. Could be Devonta Smith, could be a long Jalen Hurts run. But I think they're going to really lean on everyone focusing on Saquon Barkley, and it's going to open up some other part of the team and just give them that slight edge, and they're going to win a close game. So I don't know, that's my thoughts. What do you think about that possibly happening? Because I totally see your like they just have the championship DNA, and like it's hard to bet against that.
No, I think you make a valid point. I would probably tend to agree more with your second point than your first one. I think someone like Devontae Smith has a chance to have a big game. And I think that's my one area where I'm concerned for the Chiefs. I think the more attention you put on Saquon Barkley, the more it opens up for the Eagles, not just one, but two all-star, Super Pro Bowl caliber wide receivers. So, I think you have L'Jarius Sneed, who's a great, or sorry, Trent McDuffie is probably the, one of the best corners in the NFL, and he's proven himself in the playoffs too. I think he's going to be on AJ Brown most of the game. But Devontae Smith, he might not have the consistency of AJ Brown, but he's been known to break loose, especially in
Yeah.
big games. I mean, he did at Alabama, so I wouldn't be surprised to see a big game. If I had to go with an Eagles win prediction, I'd probably say Devontae Smith will win Super Bowl MVP. I'm right there with you in terms of that. But I just think that the Chiefs' time to lose will come, and I just don't think it's going to be this time. I think that they're too focused. Their coaching is too good. I think Spagnuolo and Andy Reid are just they're such seasoned veterans in this situation, and I think They might have been squeaking out wins during the regular season, but all that was just, that was all learning, just forming more of a game plan for what really mattered to this team, which was this big game coming up. So I think they're gonna show up and take care of business.
I see what you're saying. I really hope I really hope that you're wrong though.
I know a
But
lot of people do.
we'll have to see. I'll be watching. I think it's gonna be a good game, and I am excited to talk with you about it when we're done. See if our predictions come true. See if it is in
Definitely.
fact a close game. See if Patrick Mahomes or somehow AJ Brown win Super Bowl MVP.
We'll see.
In terms of MVPs, awards, that kind of transitions us into our next topic with some of the recent Oscar nominations. So I have the nominees, and I thought this would be an interesting topic because everyone has talked about or seen the Best Picture nominees, but more so in this year than in almost any year I can remember. There's been just a ton of controversies that have surrounded some of the nominees, some drama. It almost feels like it's like a political race, even more than the Oscars sometimes do. I don't know if you've heard some of the drama that's gone, or if I should just kind of do SparkNotes version and kind of see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think give the audience a quick Spark Notes version. That'll be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're not familiar with the 10 movies nominated for the Academy Awards for this year, I'll just read them out real quickly. This is in order on Gold Derby, the website. It kind of is a awards predictor website. This is just in order of the favorites. So starting from the most likely to the least likely to win, according to them. The Brutalist, Honora, Conclave, Amelia Perez, Wicked, A Complete Unknown, The Substance, I'm Still Here, Dune Part 2, and Nickel Boys. Of this group, I've seen all but three. I've yet to see Complete Unknown, I'm Still Here, and Nickel Boys, but I've heard great things about all three. But just for kind of a quick rundown on what some of the controversies have been, it's kind of dealing with three of kind of the four frontrunners. So as I said, those top four frontrunners are The Brutalist, Honora, Conclave, and Amelia Perez. And some of the controversies that have come about with these is The Brutalist had a huge accusation of AI use. It has kind of gone back and forth. It was with an interview with the editor. He talked about some adaptive AI use in the accents, and some people started throwing on accusations about it being used in the design. The director, Brady Corbett, came out and said that Judy Becker and the production design team used no AI in any of their design. They didn't use it in any of the English speaking parts, but they did admit to using AI in the parts of the movie that are spoken in Hungarian to modify syllables, letters that are difficult for English speakers to say. They were still speaking Hungarian, it was just modified. So there's been some drama about should Adrian Brody, should Felicity Jones be disqualified for their acting because it's essentially augmented performance, and should The Brutalist kind of be knocked down a peg because of that. Nora, which would be my pick to win Best Picture if I had a vote, has had some drama. I understand why the drama's there, but I don't fully think it's as big of a deal as some of the other drama. But it's a movie that has a lot of explicit content, and apparently there was no intimacy coordinator on set. This, if you're unfamiliar with what an intimacy coordinator is, it's kind of a newer role in film that deal with a lot of scenes with nudity or sexual content or just other scenes that could make actors feel uncomfortable to kind of create a safer space on a movie set. They've been on sets that I've been on. Oftentimes, like sets are locked down and they're kind of the only person there with the director, DP, kind of going through the scene, which I fully respect. It has made set more comfortable for me that I've been on, and I'm sure it makes it a lot more comfortable for the actors. Apparently, for Honora, the actors were consulted about it and they said they didn't feel they needed one. So I don't think it's as big of an issue as some people are making it out to be. It's not like they were declined to have one, but that has been some drama going on recently. And then Amelia Perez has had a lot of drama. I'll put aside all my thoughts on that movie aside, but the lead actress has said some questionable things on Twitter that have been kind of racist and has said some things. She's kind of stepped back and forth on some topics and made some comments that she's kind of tried to pull back on and say that's not what she meant. And obviously, I think things can get misconstrued online pretty easily, but just with some of the comments that she made, felt pretty disrespectful, along with the fact that they also were found to have used AI in the vocal range of some of the singing performances to modify that, which I
Which
think is a more egregious issue than the Hungarian parts of The Brutalist, because I think that a musical using AI to expand the music is worse than a movie that's primarily in English using it to modify a different language. Now, I don't speak Hungarian, so I guess there's a little bit of disconnect there. I'm sure that would be more harmful to me if that was a language I spoke, and I fully admit that. But I do think that it's maybe a little bit more severe in Amelia Perez's case. So I don't know if you've heard any of those controversies yet, Ethan, but I'm curious what your thoughts on any of them are, or if you think they're kind of being blown out of proportion.
Well, yeah, I'll go on record saying I've only seen Dune Part Two and I'm sorry, The Substance. Those are the only two I've seen that are on the nominations list for Best Picture. But I think in terms of The Brutalist, I think using AI for something like making Hungarian a little bit more legible is as we transition into an era of AI, I think that's pretty understandable. When it comes to the lead roles of actors that are being nominated, that's sort of a different animal. But ultimately, I think it's more about the expression of emotion and their true acting ability rather than their ability to speak Hungarian or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
Obviously, I haven't seen the film, but I think the use of AI is should be considered less of an issue for both of those films that you brought up, including Amelia Perez as well. So in my eyes, it really I think those tweets from the lead actress and Amelia Perez, those shouldn't be taken lightly. It is interesting to think about if those had surfaced at a different time, would this conversation be different if they had surfaced a year and a half ago, or if
Hmm.
they surfaced after the award ceremony? I think this movie would be judged differently. So it's hard for me to quantify how much that might affect the awards. Obviously, Amelia Perez has gotten a ton of recognition. At the Golden Globes, they had a tremendous night, and so I don't know. It's tough. It's tough when you are going to evaluate a movie differently at the Golden Globes versus the Oscars when there's just a controversy with one of the actors that was a part of making the film. But ultimately it's their decision. And, I just hope that we can enjoy the art that these movies have produced instead of focusing too much on what's trying to bring down this big night that's coming up. So,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that while all of them are like issues for sure, I think that there are a lot bigger issues in the world to focus on. And I think the timing of a lot of these controversies is very bizarre, kind of in the heat of Oscar voting. They feel a lot like slander campaigns, and that just feels like they're way more meant to be takedowns of art than they are actual critiques of the art themselves or the people involved, honestly. And all of the things are hearsay. I wasn't on the set of The Brutalist. I don't know anyone that worked on Honora, so I can't be a testament to that. I don't know Carla Sofia Gascon, so I can't attest to her character. And so it's one of those things that you have to separate art from artists, parts of art from other parts of art. I'm still very excited for the Oscars. I still hope Amelia Perez doesn't win. Not because of controversy. It's the same thing with the Super Bowl. I don't want the Chiefs to win, but I don't want them to lose because the Eagles got a cheap penalty or something like that. I don't want Amelia Perez to lose because of a slander campaign or because of misinterpretations of something. Same with the Brutalist, same with the Nora. Whatever wins, it's a body voters that I am not a part of. So I want them to vote for what they think is the best movie in a way that's not slandered by outside influences. And it's like, it's kind of one of those things people have said you can't or can pay for an Oscar. And there's some validity to that for sure with ad campaigns and stuff like that. But let's hope it's not because of kind of these things that are coming up that are just kind of feel more like attacks on character and stuff like that. But we'll see kind of what comes of that as the award season progresses. We got some more things that will give kind of better ideas on where the awards are trending. There's a couple award shows that are going to happen before the Oscars that happen a month from today, or at least the day that we're filming this. And we'll get a kind of better idea of is this actually going to affect one of these? Will a movie like Conclave or Wicked kind of come out and kind of take that new frontrunner spot because of these or for other reasons? Because the Oscars have a weird voting system. It's not they just pick who they want to win, they rank them. So sometimes a movie that like half the people put one and half the people put 10 will lose because everyone put another movie at number two. So this could be one of those years. Maybe everyone puts Conclave at number three and Conclave wins, and it'll be really interesting. That would kind of fit the vibe of what happens in Conclave. For those of that have seen it, it's about choosing popes, and kind of different candidates kind of start falling as they learn more about them. So it would be kind of funny actually if that was the movie that ended up winning. But yeah, so that kind of is our movie segment of this episode, and I'm sure we'll talk more about some new releases. We're going to try to do in the future maybe a watch or something for a first time watch for each of us and kind of discuss it going forward. But for our last little segment, just kind of a brief thing of like what are games we watched this week, music we listened to, or movies that we saw that we just kind of want to give a shout out to. So Ethan, I'm curious what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'll start with the music before I dive into the sports. I listened to the first half of The Weeknd's new album, which was recommended by you. And I say the first half a little bit regretfully because I was down on the range at the golf course hitting some balls, and I was like, I want to put on the Weeknd album. And so
Hmm.
I put it on, and I got a chance to, listen to the lyrics, and it's honestly pretty depressing. It's,
Yeah.
you start to feel for the Weeknd and him as a person, because he's definitely letting out all of his feelings about the ups and downs of his career, and the highest of the highs, but those also come with the lows to the lows for him. And I think it is the same for a lot of successful singers and actors and people who are in those super high adrenaline sort of spaces where to keep getting that sort of fix, it often leads you down a road of addiction and alcoholism, things like that, which I know the Weeknd has gone through. So he definitely lets it all out. I gotta say, from a musical standpoint, there was only a couple songs that I heard that I truly enjoyed. I haven't made it through the whole album, but
Hmm.
was able to hear the song with the future feature, and I thought
Hmm.
that was pretty good. Yeah, I think some of the Weeknd's past works are going to be hard to beat. He's definitely a generational artist. But yeah, overall, I know you liked it. I wasn't the biggest fan, if I'm being honest, of the
So that's
Weeknd's
fair.
album. Wasn't the biggest fan, but then again, I've been pretty negative about new music. I've not found an album that's come out brand new, first time listen, where I've just been like, that's awesome. It's
Hmm.
been a long time, and I tend to find old albums that I go back to where I discover songs and you know albums that I like. But yeah, I think finding new music is a tough art, and I don't think it always comes from the people you'd expect. So gonna stay on the hunt for some more good new music. In terms of sports, it was a big week on Duke's campus, or a big night last night, I should say. Big win over UNC in a game that wasn't
Nice.
all that close, but we don't mind that. And for people who don't know, there's a tradition at Duke where whenever we get a win at home, all of the students who went to the game walk straight back to the main quad, and there's all these huge benches in front of each of the dorms that sort of has the name of the dorm on it. So it might say, Cohane or Wilson or whatever the name of the dorm is. And there's massive benches, like, bigger than you'd ever imagine. And groups of people will carry those benches into the center of the quad and light a big fire,
Oh my
and they
gosh.
call it burning the benches. And it's a really cool tradition to be a part of. I was lucky enough to be a part of that my freshman year when we beat UNC at home, and lucky enough we were in town. We were out of town for golf. And then last year we were not in town, but this year we were in town, and just a really cool tradition to see everyone come together. And a school like Duke, who has unfortunately limited a lot of the freedoms of kids to do things like that, like burning things on campus, they still make sure that
Understandably.
understandably, not promoting fires on school campuses, but it's very cool that they allow us to do it in a controlled environment. We were laughing because they literally made the ground around it so wet so that the fire had no chance of spreading, which is definitely good for
That's
safety,
good.
and they
Yeah.
had helicopters circling and whatnot. But really cool, something I don't take for granted. And that might not have been the most exciting game of the week, but something that was really cool for us to see.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the score, 87-70 Duke, advanced to 19-2 on the season, number two in the country. So always fun to be ranked high and beat your rival. I mean, sometimes it's like I mean, you can look at teams that's like even if they have a bad season, it's like beating a rival. Sometimes it's the best feeling, but obviously being able to beat the rival while also having a great season, having the fun traditions and stuff, it's the best. And it does make me wonder. I'm like, I wonder if they have like a bench fund. Like every
Mhm.
year, they're like, all right, this is the money we're setting aside just in case we beat UNC at home.
Yeah, those
Just
benches are not going to come back. You got to buy them. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good point. Yeah, the one
So
last thing I'd add is just if people haven't had a chance to watch Cooper Flag closely and they've just seen highlights, he's truly special. He's not just another Duke freshman who was a top five recruit. He's legitimately, in my mind, he could be compared to LeBron James early on in his career. The way he impacts the game. I mean, just to see the upward trajectory he's been on and the fact that he always plays hard, doesn't let his ego get in the way, and just wants to win games more than anything. As a just turned 18-year-old, it's something that I've never seen. I mean, I didn't grow up watching LeBron when he was 18, so it's something that I've never seen. And you just have to pull for the guy. He's grounded, he's humble, and he just works really hard. And I think whatever NBA team he ends up going to is going to be so lucky to have him. He's really special.
yeah, I'm excited to see kind of where he ends up. Even though I'm not a Spurs fan, I don't know. I just kind of like want him to go to the Spurs for some reason. I
That
think
would be
that
cool.
for some reason the idea of like Chris Paul, Wemby, and Cooper Flag being together, it's like you have like this all-time great in terms of basketball IQ teaching these like two like young superstars. I don't know. The Spurs are one of those teams. It's like when they're a dynasty, it's like I feel like it wasn't they weren't hateable. Like they weren't a team that you're like, oh God, the Spurs. I mean, granted, I was pretty young, but they've never been a team that I've been like really dislike. Like I feel like the Celtics or the Lakers or teams like that like these bigger market teams are easier to dislike. But I feel like the Spurs, I don't know, just of the teams that he could go to, I feel like that would be an interesting one. But I'm curious to see wherever he goes. So
Coached by Popovich, that'd be pretty
yeah,
cool.
that would be cool.
Hope he sticks around.
Any recent movie watches?
Yeah, I've definitely had a couple outside of those two I mentioned that are nominations, but the one that I told you I was going to watch and I did was Pulp Fiction, and watched it for the first time. Quentin Tarantino movie. Definitely not the first Tarantino movie I've watched. I've watched Reservoir Dogs, Django Unchained. Might have been one more as well, but I remember the audience doesn't know this, but I had told you that I'm not the biggest Tarantino fan, but I went into this movie with an open mind. And I will say this was my favorite Tarantino movie. I think the ratings are right on that one. If you go on IMDb, it's ranked in the top 10 all time. Wouldn't be in my top 10 all time, but I think it's, when you look past Tarantino, or at least when I look past Tarantino's desire to put so much dialogue in his movies, which can be viewed as impressive. I think it is impressive to write that much dialogue, but I think it can make the movie seem slow at times, even though, I think there's some pretty phenomenal acting from Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson in particular. John Travolta, I think, is a very interesting character. I saw something it said he was like drunk for that role, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense because he's just kind of it seems like he's fading in and out of like knowing what he's doing, which I think was the point. But for those who haven't watched the movie, it's definitely worth a watch, and I think the would definitely watch till the end because the ending scene kind of brings everything together. And while Tarantino might not be my style, I'm open to hearing more about what you have to say, Travis, about Tarantino, because I know he's liked by a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely great to me, and I hope that maybe Pulp Fiction, it's like he maybe pulls you back in on the Tarantino hype train a little bit. But I mean, he's not ever been my favorite director, but he's been one that has made a lot of movies that I've loved. I mean, I do think that he has some weaker movies. I'm not the biggest fan of Jackie Brown. Death Proof is kind of okay to me, and I don't love Inglourious Bastards or Kill Bill as much as everyone else. But I do love Reservoir Dogs. I do love Pulp Fiction and Django. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is one of my favorite movies of all time. So,
That's the other one I have watched. Yeah, that's the
which I
last
know
one.
you do not like.
Not the biggest fan. Not the biggest fan.
But I mean, he's a really interesting filmmaker to me. Every time there's like that rumored, oh, this is Tarantino's 10th movie, I get really excited for it. And then he's like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore. It makes me sad. Like, there's so many cool ideas that he's proposed. So he's one of those guys that he's not on the level of like Scorsese or Nolan or Fincher for me, but he's right there. So I'm excited to see whatever he does next. And Yeah, I mean, at some point we'll get that announcement of what it actually is. But I'm glad that you watched that because it's I mean that's not that movies I've watched recently have been bad, but that's a better movie than I've any of the ones I've watched recently, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, what's the most notable one you've watched recently?
I watched this movie called Threads. It's an 80s movie. It was aired on the BBC in 1984, and it was kind of a nuclear apocalypse warning kind of movie. It's actually insane that it aired on TV because the second half is pretty brutal. I didn't love it, but I do think it was like well made for a TV movie. I saw Flight Risk today, the Mel Gibson, Mark Wahlberg plane movie, which was really bizarre and had some really strange acting by Mark Wahlberg as just like this really, really over the top like psychopath. And he's bald for some reason. And instead of wearing a bald cap, Mark Wahlberg actually just shaved like the middle of his head. And there's no reason for his character to be bald, so it just makes him look weird. There's so many odd choices in that movie. It wasn't bad, but it was just like so bizarre that like the guy that directed Braveheart and Hacksaw Ridge and Passion of the Christ, like these big scale, thoughtful, epic movies is like I'm gonna direct this weird plane thriller with Mark Wahlberg as a bald psychopath. Like it just doesn't. Mel Gibson must have a kid who's starting college or something because it's like that's the only thing I can think of is that he needed a quick paycheck, or he's funding his next big movie because that was weird. But a recent watch I loved that I really want people to check out came out this weekend, Companion. It is a directorial debut by this guy, Drew Hancock. He was at the screening I was at. Speaking of Tarantino, I saw it at the Vista Theater in Hollywood, which is one of the two theaters that Quentin Tarantino owns out here. So that it's a great theater. Highly recommend it to anyone. They show everything on film. So I got to see Companion on the only 35 millimeter print in the world of it with the director there, and that was really cool. It's a movie I don't want to spoil. Some trailers and stuff kind of spoil it, but not as much as I think people thought it would. I'm trying to be really vague. It's great. It's like thriller, horror, comedy. It's funnier than I thought it would be. It's more unique than I thought it would be. I'm a huge fan of the kind of genre bending horror that kind of leans into the comedy. Happy Death Day, Freaky, Ready or Not, Abigail, like these movies that are like ridiculous, kind of over the top horror movies, or like they play on a genre, fascinate me. And this one kind of plays on sci-fi, thriller, horror, comedy. I saw it with a couple of friends, and it's great. I mean, I've only seen two movies this year or that were released in 2025, and it's Companion and Flight Risk. And Companion is significantly higher than Flight Risk so far for me. I don't think it's going to end up being one of my favorites of the year, but it's going to be like Ready or Not or Happy Death Day in that same vein of movies that I'm like, oh, this is a movie that you can show to a non-horror person that can help get them into the genre because it's not that scary. It's violent, but it's not excessively violent. And the characters are not complete idiots. And so it doesn't have some of those things that pull people out. The lead actress, Sophie Thatcher, is incredible. She's really, really good in it. She has a way more dynamic, layered performance than I thought she would have kind of at the start. I think all of the issues, the bad acting, the cliches, the excessive violence, the scariness, a lot of those things that people avoid horror for, I think this one kind of tones a lot of those down or pushes them away entirely. And I really hope people see this because the director seems like he was a great guy in the little kind of snippet he gave before the show. It's his first movie. He's been trying for years, and he's like, if I don't get to make another movie, I want to put everything I had into this one. And I love hearing that. So it's not Pulp Fiction, but if you have a chance, I do recommend going out and seeing it. So
This guy knows what he's talking about. I'm gonna go check it out.
yeah, so those are my recent watches. I didn't get a chance to watch a ton of sports this week. Watched a 0-0 soccer game yesterday, which is always exhilarating.
That was fun.
But at least RB Leipzig didn't lose. That's one of my soccer teams. So I'm a big fan of the new Weekend album. I don't think it's as good as After Hours yet. After Hours may be my favorite single album of all time, maybe. But yeah, I can see some of Ethan's comments there. But I guess that's kind of my quick snippet because I could go on and on about this kind of recent slate of movies, but really wanted to give a highlight to Companion. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up our episode 0. We are open to any comments, critiques about this. We want to make this a show that kind of encapsulates things. Obviously, we're going to talk about things that we care about because that's what's easiest for us to talk about. And it's honestly what we know the most about too. So definitely going to kind of have sports and film be the focus, but any other aspects of entertainment that people listening that want to hear our thoughts on, or movies that people want us to discuss, open to hearing about that. And yeah, excited to hopefully do more of these. Ethan, any kind of final thoughts?
Yeah, just really excited to get things going. Yeah, just want to provide a open space where we can be honest about all these different areas. No judgment from me. I know no judgment from you. So yeah, we're open to anything. I know things were a little wishy-washy in this episode, but definitely going to clean things up going forward and deliver some great content for people, hopefully. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and not quite sure what our platform will be, but we'll figure that out. And wherever you're currently listening to it, that's probably going to be one of the main places that we're going to put it. So thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
See you guys.